Welcome back to the Building Bigger Lives podcast. I'm Kathryn Peterson here today with my co-host Michael Regan, and we have another guest today, which we love to bring you guests from our great industry. Today we have Dino Katsiametis, and he is not only the host of a popular podcast called The Way. He's been in the industry for 28 years. He's the CEO of Ethos Lending and Ethos Real Estate Group. 4 kids, busy guy. But his big ambition is to change the mortgage industry and leave a legacy. And that's pretty exciting. So we're going to dig into that a little bit today. But first, let me welcome in Michael. Thanks for being here.
Kathryn, I always love being with you, and it's great to be with a guest. Dino and I had a chance to have a version of this conversation on his podcast, and I realized, oh my gosh, I so much want to turn the tables and interview you now, and I want to have that opportunity to learn about your story. So, Dino, join us in the frame. It's good to have you today.
Yeah, thanks, you guys. I really appreciate it. And I'm an open book, and I have a lot to share after 28 years. So anything you guys want, I'm here for you.
All right. Well, hopefully you're going to help us solve all the housing industry problems in the next 30 minutes. It's going to be fantastic. But, you know, our audience might have heard Kathryn's overview of your, the highlights in your resume, but I don't think you just fell off the turnip truck. I think at some point you got into this crazy business because there were some things in your life that maybe our audience wouldn't know about. And sometimes that's the nugget where we learn about your leadership style. Can you take me back to childhood and tell me a little bit about the young man, the man who was maybe a young boy looking ahead at life and thinking, what do I want to be when I grow up? What were some of those early memories you had about those kind of thoughts?
So that one's pretty easy for me because I first of all, I'm Greek. If you guys didn't figure that out with my name, and just like any good Greek boy, you're always working in the restaurant with your dad. And so I grew up working in several different restaurants that my dad had. And it was always a lesson. Every time something happened, my dad was one of those guys where he wanted to teach me the lesson in what just happened. And most of the time it was, let me teach you what I did wrong so you don't repeat that, right? And he always had this way about him that at those years, I would even say it was a little boring. Like, come on, Dad, like another one. And now years later, it's like I learned a lot from that. So I still take a lot of the stories my dad told me, only I move it from the hamburger or the burrito to the loan, right? And at the end of the day, it's still the same exact thing. How you treat people matters, and how good the quality of your ingredients is for making the food is the exact same thing with how good of a mortgage advisor are you, and what are you giving back to your clients because of that? So it's really all the same lessons. And a quick little story as far as the young guy goes, the young entrepreneur. In most Greek families, you don't get paid. You're just part of the family. It's all yours anyway. Is the exact words I heard too many times. And so what I did is I would take summertime, you want to be at the beach, instead you're behind the grill. But I would always take a break and I'd fill up a bag with burritos and I'd take them down to the beach and I'd walk out and I'd sell the bag of burritos and make my 20, 30 bucks and go back to the restaurant.
There you go. An entrepreneurial spirit early on. Tell me what Dad was like. Was he a great leader in the sense of, like, did he have vision? Did he have a plan? Or was this just a guy who had been passed down a tradition from his father and his father's father? What was your dad like?
Yeah. So he was, for his generation, right? Especially coming from a foreign country, all he did, along with all the rest of the immigrants, all they did was work. And I'd say one of the biggest lessons I took, which he taught me, is that if you're too busy working all the time, then you're too busy to make any significant changes in your life. And those significant changes are what's going to change everything. So being caught up with how busy you are all the time is one of the biggest killers, right? So he taught me a long time ago to first always seek wisdom from others, right? So reading books, speaking to guys like you, right? Which is why I've always seeked coaching, because there's wisdom there. And then step away, right? Step away, go see something that catches your eye, and then come back and implement it. So that was the kind of man he was. And he was fortunate enough that when after several years of being here, he landed a job where it was in the hotel business, and the owner liked my dad. And he said, "You're not like all the other Greeks. You have something special about you." And it's because my dad always wanted to be better. So he gave him a chance, and he actually became kind of a father figure to my dad, because my dad talked about him a lot as I was growing up, and a lot of the lessons he learned from him. And what it was old man taught him how to talk to people, taught him how to, avoid problems and just press forward, and how to implement, right? So eventually my dad kind of worked his way up from busboy to or dishwasher to busboy to waiter to bar back to bartender to food and beverage manager, over 200 people. And that was a huge deal. But my dad always said, one of the biggest reasons why is because he bettered himself, where a lot of the other guys just stayed behind the grill and never got out front, because they didn't bother trying to learn the language, and they didn't bother trying to get out of their environment that they were in. And my dad always sought how to get out of whatever environment he was in into something better. And even as a kid, I still remember, like, I think, who was it? Was it Jim Rohn that said, show me the 5 people you hang around with, and I'll show you, And my dad said, always remember that. Always remember that. And, working in the restaurant, a lot of times you're not working with highly educated people, right? And my dad just kept saying, like, hey, you're here and you're serving a purpose, but don't end up here. Even if you take over the restaurants one day, he goes, don't end up in the kitchen, end up managing them, end up over here.
So, Dino, I'm thinking back to, like, you were raised kind of in the restaurant business. And then as you got older, you probably were thinking, hey, how can I step outside and learn more and do more? So give me an example of maybe in your 20s, 30s, where you had the opportunity to step out of your current environment to learn something new, to step up into something else that then led to more in your life.
So I've always been a believer, and when I coach younger people now, I always tell them, don't spend too much time trying to figure out which is the right door to open. I said, it doesn't even really matter. Just open a door, open it. It's rarely ever the right door anyway, but one door leads to another door and another door and another door. And eventually, when you keep opening those doors, you're going to get to something that you're after, but you're never going to get there if you just keep trying to make a decision of which door to open, right? Plow through it. And I guess, so another thing very few people know about me, but while I was in college, a friend of mine had started doing some work with a Japanese guy, and the Japanese guy said, can you find these used Levi's for me? And next thing you know, I've got an ad in the Penny Saver, for those of you that are old enough to know what a Penny Saver is. And it was a little classified ad, cash for used Levi's. And I started buying these used Levi's while I was in college. Well, one thing led to another. And I barely graduated my senior year in college because I was buying used Levi's all the time. And then I ended up opening my first little store. There was a lot of stuff in between, but opened up my first little store. And the next thing you know, I had 5 stores, and I was buying and selling thousands and thousands of used Levi's every single year. And I did that for almost 10 years before I got into the mortgage business. So that was a lot of lessons rolled up into one, because I was dealing a lot. Well, first, buying them, you're always negotiating. Somebody always wants more than what you're willing to pay. And then selling them is a big deal, because now you're dealing with all these foreigners. And I learned a lot of lessons, because foreigners aren't like Americans, basically. They're not nice. They're always trying to get it. They're always trying to get the best of you. And I had to learn how to negotiate, because that was a whole different style. And I'm a kid in my 20s at this point, dealing with total sharks. So that was a really interesting period of time, but I really enjoyed it. And I think the lessons I learned from that helped me to really not have any fear with what I do, combined with my dad's motivation of always like the motivation of telling me I can do it, and the motivation of seeking wisdom to learn how to do it better every time. And the fact that you make mistakes doesn't matter. Just don't make them again.
I'm now curious, what were you studying back in college? Because my guess is your roadside MBA turned out to be way more valuable than whatever that was. But what were you studying as a young man in college?
Well, I started off as business, and then I took an accounting class, and I was like, "Are you kidding me? This is ridiculous." And then I had a friend of mine that told me to work backwards with what my major is, and then all the classes I need to take back, right? So I was still a freshman. And what I didn't realize that was a valuable lesson when you're first starting college, you take this class because you think it's going to be a good class, or it's the class you want to take, but it's totally worthless because it's not a prerequisite to the next class. So then you're ending up having to take another class all over again. You're just wasting time. So anyways, I mapped it all out, and it was going to take me 5 years. So I switched my major to public relations, and I graduated in 4. So it was a PR major, and I still remember a couple valuable lessons.
Yeah.
One is the people. Trying to pick up girls was like one of the most valuable possible sales skill you could ever learn, because you're gonna get rejected, and you got to learn how to overcome rejection, right? So that was the big one. But then in public relations, I don't have something that I could do it with, but this one lesson, I remember it. Somebody took a magazine and they went like this, and they turned the magazine. I basically had 2 seconds to look at what was on the picture. And then the question was asked, do you remember what you saw? What did you see? And the answer is very simple. If it didn't jump out and scream at you, it sucked. It was terrible. And I've always kind of remembered that. I was like, all right, same with news articles they taught us, right? What's the headline? And what's that first sentence or two? If you don't nail it by then, you've lost them. So I think that's a valuable lesson just in life in general. You gotta nail it early and capture them, right? That otherwise you typically don't get anywhere.
So I'm guessing, at this point in your life, you're a young man, whatever that is, 22, 23, you're tossing around used Levi's all over the place, making deals. And at some point you've got to decide, is this my career, or was this just a hustle to get me through college? What was the turning point when you decided it's time to move forward? What changed?
So how when the interest rates go up in the mortgage business, everything sucks for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in my business, when I was doing the import export, and at the time I was doing a lot more than just the jeans after, almost 10 years of it, the Japanese economy in, I don't know, late 90s absolutely tanked. And at the time I was selling primo used Levi's for $34 a pair. And they dropped down to 16 overnight. So I sat there, and the one thing I'll say is, when you get used to making money, it's pretty hard not to make money again. And I just decided I was kind of done with it. So I decided at that point I was going to get into real estate. I closed I had 5 retail stores, but the majority of the money was coming from the wholesale part that I was selling to Japan and Europe and various places. And that was actually, it wasn't as much fun or show like. The retail stores were the fun part, but the reality is that's where the money was. And when all of that died and I was back down and making $60,000 a year, I was like, and back then even $60,000 for a young guy was okay, but it's like, this sucks. Can't do anything on $60,000 a year. And I thought, all right, I'm going to pivot. I was going to get into real estate. And ultimately, I had a friend from college say, hey, dude, you should consider mortgage. Back then, it was back when the 125s were in play, and we're making 10 points and we're slamming these things in 2 weeks. And I thought about it and I was like, back then realtors used to drive everywhere, right? You had to go pick up the people and take them to all the houses. And I had just finished driving, I don't know, 30,000 miles a year, visiting from store to store to store and going up to LA all the time and all this stuff. And I was like, I'm done driving. I'm going to sit in an office. I'm going to make money in an office. And that was ultimately the only decision why I got into a mortgage over real estate. And it turned out to be a fantastic thing.
So since now you're in mortgage, working, through and up and learning all the different things that mortgage involves, kind of tell me how that leadership journey evolved and how you've changed over the last, let's say, 20 years as you've been doing it, as far as your focus and your inspiration now, because it sounds like you have some kind of fun things that inspire you every day.
Yeah, for sure. So I've owned the company for a long time, but I've never cared about trying to grow because I was always the producer. And I was always a good producer. And I didn't like managing per se, right? So I just stuck to producing. Whoever wanted to come along can come along and get the benefits of my production and my systems and all that stuff. But at some point, I've always loved people, and I'm truly a real people person. So I've always loved talking to the people and taking care of the people, and really creating lifelong relationships after years and years and years with them. But I lost interest in everything else. And ultimately I had a health scare one day. It was right after COVID. I got COVID finally. After all those years, I finally got COVID. And then after about 2 weeks after COVID was gone, of my COVID, all of a sudden I had double vision. So it was like, whoa, double everything. And I didn't know what was happening, right? So I went to the hospital and they're testing me for all this stuff. And this is pathetic, but I remember being in the hospital and they said they found something in my head. And I was like, oh, shoot. I actually do have something, so I called my wife, and at the time nobody could be with me because it was the COVID years, right? So I was in there all by myself. And I called my wife and I said, honey, if anything happens to me, you have to pretend like I'm alive for like at least 2 to 4 weeks, just so all the commission checks can keep coming in, right? Because there's hundreds of thousands of dollars coming in. And I'm like, pay the other loan officers out, like give them their due, but tell them they need to start figuring it out for themselves. And then collect as many as you can that's ours, and then tell everybody I'm dead and get the life insurance and be done. I'm like sitting here telling my wife to pretend I'm alive for 2 to 4 weeks. It's the stupidest thing in the world, right? So I quickly learned that I had to restructure everything. Like I knew she'd be okay financially, but I had to restructure. That is no end of life plan. and what happened is I couldn't work. So for the first time, I couldn't work. I had a great system. My team was awesome, but I still was a big part of the driving force. And I did every initial consultation and I was a master at it, right? So how is it going to work without me? Well, for the first time, I was forced to find out how it was going to work without me, and it worked. And I was like, boy, that really worked out great. In fact, I don't want to go back to doing what I did. I want to be semi-retired. And all that meant was instead of working 60-hour weeks, I didn't want to work more than 30 hours anymore. And I quickly went on a hunt to learn how to be better and how to, I forget the theory of whatever it is, but it's like when you're going on vacation, somehow you manage to get everything done and even clean off your desk. So it was a piece where I had to train my brain to pretend like I was going on vacation every single day. So I would do golf lessons or something that was going to cost me money in the middle of the day. That if I didn't go, I was going to have to pay. And I hate paying for something I didn't get the advantage of. And sure enough, I'd get all my work done by that time because I knew I had to leave. And I got really good at it. And I ended up averaging 18 and a half hours a week for the next 2 years. And during that period of time, I ended up being rested and out of all the work. And that's when I came up with this great idea. And I came back and I said, you know what? Everything is changing, is shifting. The industry is shifting. We saw it in the real estate side first, and mortgages, finances are always late to the party, right? Because conservative. So I was ready to change it and bring it in. And I'll tell you exactly what that means in a second. But just to kind of finish off the first part of the story, I ended up being totally fine. I didn't have any medical issues. But what I had was I had a tooth infection that I didn't know about. And that tooth infection caused my nerve 6 to get paralyzed. And that caused my right eye to not be able to move. So I'm only saying that because a lot of times people put off their teeth. And I mean, I go regularly. I just didn't know I had this. And one of the doctors, I went to a million of them, but one of the doctors said, he goes, you know how lucky you are that you got COVID and this happened? He goes, you would have been dead like that. You know how many guys your age die relatively healthy? You hear they ate good, they exercised. How did they die?
Wow.
He goes, when oral infections get in your blood, it goes to your brain or to your heart and you're dead. And that's how close I was. So it was probably the best thing that happened to me. But aside from surviving, it got me to where my journey is today with Ethos Lending. And I came back and I said, all right, I'm going to blow this up, but what am I going to do different that's going to add real value? And that's where I really sat through and started changing everything. So to start with, on the real estate side, you guys are familiar with EXP and with Real, and they have this comp model where it's really multi-level marketing, right? But everybody wins. If you want to partake in helping the company, you're going to win. So I created that exact same model, and basically it's a revenue share model. So if you refer me somebody, you become an ambassador to Ethos Lending, then you make a percentage on all of the loans that person brings in. But if that person brings in more people and other people bring in more people and so on, it becomes this organization that you're making money on. And that's why EXP blew up and Real blew up the way they did, because everybody working there is part of the sales force. They're all trying to bring in other people. And like I always say, I don't want employees. In fact, I said it earlier, I didn't want to manage. Well, I had a coach one time that said, it's not about managing, it's about being a leader. You manage, you're failing. If you're leading, you're winning. So I decided, all right, I'm going to learn how to lead properly, not manage. And I'm going to bring something new to the industry. So I bring in the revenue share component. And then I bring in the Always Present program, which is what blew up my business as much as it did. And people, it's gifting at the highest level you've ever seen. People always say, oh, I do that. I'm like, I'm sure you do. Tell me what you do. And what most people do is they wait to make money on a client before they actually buy a gift at the end to say thank you. Well, we do gifts from the very beginning. As soon as you get the pre-approval, then you get a gift. So my average client will get somewhere between 13 and 16 gifts from the day they get pre-approved to their 1-year anniversary. And the connection that is formed by doing this is at the highest level you've ever seen. So the amount of referrals you're going to get is sky high, better than you've ever seen before. And it's a consistent and repeatable way of getting business every single time. And I've done it for years, so I know it works. So that's number 2, but here's the one I'm most proud of. It's not even live yet. I'm close, but it's not live yet. But in 2026, I will be live on this. I'm calling it the MUM, Mortgages Under Management. And it's a conversion from being a loan officer to being a mortgage advisor. And it's a true book of business. So here's the thing, financial planners and insurance guys, when they want to retire, they have a book that they get to sell. What do mortgage guys have? Nothing. We don't have anything. Even if you're doing a lot of business, oh yeah, blah, blah, blah mortgage company gave me $1 million to move. Well, did they buy your book or did they just buy you? Because you can't retire. You have to go over there and keep selling. That's not retirement. That's not business, right? That's just being an employee somewhere. So what I've created is it's really a book of business. And our commitment to our mortgage advisors is if you do business the Ethos way and you use all of the platforms that we're putting together, because it's part of how you do business, can't use your cell phone and expect that you have a real business, right? You got to use a software that is trackable, that has AI built into it, that a team can take over, right? All these things. But then the whole algorithm is the average age of your clients, the average interest rate of your book, of your portfolio, right? Like how many referrals do you get? How much repeat business do you get? How many of them are leaving you and you don't even know it, and they're doing refinances or buying houses elsewhere? All of these things combined, and it spits out a number that says, this is what your book is worth. And if you ever want to sell it, then first, your book goes up for sale to all the mortgage advisors at Ethos Lending. As a company, we're going to step in with all of the data points and financing to facilitate a buyout. And if nobody wants to buy it, we'll buy it. And finally, and I'll stop talking. If you get hit by a bus, right, we will do the exact same thing and take over your book and buy out your family.
Where did this idea come from, Dino? I mean, clearly you've put a lot of energy into this and it's obviously up and running, but where did the idea come from? Was it just you sitting down saying there's got to be a way, or did you see something that you were able to borrow from another example in another industry and you like, what was the story?
Yeah. So first of all, it's how I've been doing business for years, right? It's how a lot of us have, but not all of us. The good ones have been. You're only as good as your last deal. Heard that a million times. I've never believed it because I still have clients that I met 28 years ago. Still. And even if they're not buying any more homes, their kids are, and I have their kids, right? I mean, that's because I've done business a certain way. So I'll tell you exactly where it came from. Because I will admit, even though I was building that out, I didn't have that key component of the mom being sellable. And I did a early morning walk and talk with, can you tell me who?
Dave
Todd
Savage.
Buxton.
Who?
We named two different people. I did Todd Buxton, and Michael did Dave Savage.
So I did an early morning walk and talk, sunrise walk with Dave Savage. And you know, I was telling him about everything I'm doing. He goes, brother, if you can figure out this one thing, I think you got something. And he told me his mom used to be an insurance agent and told me the story. And he's like, I don't know why nobody's been able to figure it out, but if you can figure that out, I think you got it. And I left. I was like, I mean, we're already doing it. The only thing we got to do better is connect all the systems and be able to have them talk, because you can't spit out, the algorithm can't work if you don't know everything. And that's one of the reasons why you can't use a cell phone. You got to use the system, you know, and then it's getting better and easier and cheaper, you know, through all the different platforms that are out there now. Like, not everybody knows. You think you have a client, but you don't even know that they just bought another house with somebody else. Well, guess what? They're not in your book of business anymore. Out, right? Like, there's all these little things, but every aspect of how you do business can now be tracked. And that's really, really cool. And once you figure that out, I mean, to me, analytics, I love analytics. Like, I get off on that. So how can you make something better if you don't know what's actually happening? And I look at it like the internal coaching that we can do through all those analytics is enough to like make somebody so much better, because we can show them. But now we can take it to that next level and say that you're working with purpose, because it's your business. It's not mine. It's your business. I don't own your data. It's yours. We'll store it. We'll do it all. But unlike a lot of these mortgage companies that sue everybody when they leave and they don't want to give you anything, and then you got the good loan officers that have like a shadow database. I'm like, gosh, that's such BS. It's hard enough just to have one database that's perfect. Now you're going to have a shadow one. I'll tell you what, and I have it in my contract. If you ever want to leave, first and foremost, it's got to be my fault because I'm not giving you something that you want, right? So I'll take the heat on that. But second of all, I will wrap it up and tie it in a bow for you and give you all of your data because it's yours. Now, if we were providing leads and we were paying, that's a different story, right? But if you're going out there and you're putting your name on the line and you're getting all these clients, right? And I don't care if you use my Always Present program. I don't care if you use some of my stuff. It's your client. I promise you, and it's on paper, in a contract, that it's your data. And that way I can have full buy-in from these mortgage advisors that they don't have to worry about it, right? And I hope I'm showing enough confidence that says I'm putting it all out there too. That's the goal behind that.
Kathryn, I'm listening to Dino unpack this, and you said up front, that he was on a mission to change the mortgage industry, and this reminds me of another guest we had when we talked with Ryan. I think he also sees the world through that lens with his company, and I think we have other friends in the industry that maybe think this way. But Dino, you're actually doing it. It's one thing to have thoughts. It's one thing to have belief. You're putting this into practice. You're actually executing on your vision. Maybe that's a great way to come into a landing position on today's episode. How important is vision to you in the way that you are going to continue to operate when you look into the future of what you've built? Is vision really a key ingredient, or is this back to just, man, I just open doors, I see what's happening, and I figure out where the next door is? What does that look like when we look into your future of Ethos?
Yeah. So there's a vision. I see it clear as day. My wife's not as happy because I haven't been bringing home the paychecks like I used to for her. And it's because we're investing everything we have into it. I'm literally putting everything into this, and I just see it clear as day. This is going to be amazing, and we're building something so special. And it's not just what I've talked about. It's truly so much more. We've talked about this before, but I truly have a love for people. And I want to make sure people are treated right. And that goes from clients to everybody at Ethos Lending as well. My shift and focus went from loving my clients and my realtors to loving my internal staff and mortgage advisors. And if I can love them and give them all the tools, then now that love can multiply. And I use the word love, and I know it's strong for a lot of people, but the reality is, that's what I feel like I'm called to do. And I know that if we go to that highest level of loving people, we will do amazing. We will do amazing, and we'll do it together. And that's why I said I'm not looking for employees. I'm looking for partners. Let's do it together. I don't want to manage you. I want to give you all the tools. I want to love you. I want to be able to inspire you and continue to change as this world changes, but maintain the key ingredient of your moral ethos, whatever your ethos is, right? In fact, I just started doing this, but all the new guys, I'm making them write what their personal ethos is so that I can put it in their file and help coach to it and pull it out every so often and say, hey, let's just have a conversation, right? This is what you told me when you first started. And I'd like to know where you land now on this.
Oh, I always love it when leaders go through vision and goals with their staff. So good job for doing that. I can definitely see your vision clearly as well. So good job communicating that, because I think that's a skill in itself. So as we get things rounded out, what's the one thing you want people to remember about Dino or about Ethos that you just don't want them to forget, and you want to be associated with that statement or that word?
I mean, I think it's pretty simple, and I'll go back to, He was a man of high moral character, and he loved people. And his ethos was, he lived out his ethos.
That's a great way to put a button on it, Dino. And the good news is, even though that sounded like a eulogy, you're still very alive and well, and there's still a lot more that you're going to accomplish. Man, I can't thank you enough for joining us today. It was a lot of fun being with you on your program. I hope folks will go check out The Way. I hope they'll go check out your personal podcast and learn more about some of the great stories you're unpacking with your guests. But it was great to have you be the guest, and it's always fun to take a host and put them in the guest seat and let them riff a little bit. So thanks so much for taking time and just giving us a glimpse about all the great things that are going on in your world. It was a lot of fun today.
Thanks so much, you guys. I really appreciate it. I had a lot of fun.
That'll put a wrap on this episode of Building Bigger Lives. Each week, Kathryn and I love unpacking topics or inviting guests that we hope you, the entrepreneurial leader in the housing industry or in whatever industry you work in, that you'll find these stories to be inspiring, stories of leadership, personal leadership, team leadership, and real transformation. We hope you'll join us each week. If you like an episode, we of course hope you'll share it within your network, and we hope you'll follow us. You can subscribe. You'll find us on all of the platforms, Apple and Spotify are the popular ones, but of course, many out there. And we just hope as you follow along that you'll continue to get more and more value. And we look forward to seeing you on an episode soon. Thanks.